Good evening. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm goes off, please leave the building in an orderly fashion through the nearest fire exit. Please use either the fire exit through the main doors of the hall or the fire exit to the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island at the front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Please also switch off mobile phones or turn them to silent. Please note that the toilet and hand washing facilities are in the foyer area. Members of the public, whilst you are of course entitled to film or take photographs during this meeting, can I please emphasise to you that this should be done without disruption to the meeting and can only be done from a designated area in the public seating. Can I please therefore ask you to raise your hand clearly in the air if you wish to take photographs or film this evening. Thank you very much. Please, members, be upstanding to receive the Chairman and Chief Executive.
Good evening, members and members of the public. Please be seated. Members, when I invite you to speak, please wait until there's a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. They are all switched on and ready for you to speak, so you do not need to adjust them. Please make sure that the microphone is directly in front of you before speaking. Members, voting will be done with a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for, then against, and then for the recommendations, and then for abstaining. Given the size of the room and the members of us present, can I please ask you that you put your hand up clearly, high in the air, so that you can be easily seen by all, and leave it up until you are asked to blow it. Members, the normal rules of debate apply. No member should speak for longer than 5 minutes, and can I please ask you do not repeat anything previously said. All those indicating to speak will be given an opportunity to speak once. Members, item 1, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Tracy Knight and Councillor Robert Milne. Are there any others?
No one's indicating, Chair.
Thank you. Members, declaration of interest, item 2. Members, on Tuesday, the 14th of February 2023, you received an email from the Democratic Services advising you that the monitoring officer had issued a dispensation for members for tonight's budget meeting, covering the setting of the council tax or a precept under the Local Government Act Finance Act 1992. Members, are there any other declarations of interest?
No one's indicating, Chair.
Cool. Members, Agenda item 3, Budget 2023 to 2024 and Medium-Term Financial Strategy. The report will be introduced by the Leader of the Council, Councillor Simon Wootton.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the meeting tonight is one of the most important in the municipal year. It is vital that we have a robust and sustainable financial plan for our future in order to continue to deliver the many important services the Council provides, both statutory and non-statutory. Our key strategic goal as a Council is to be a modern, accessible and financially sustainable Council, delivering excellent value for money services to residents and businesses in the district at a proportionate and reasonable cost from the taxes and charges we levy as an authority. Quite apart from our legal obligations, it is our collective responsibility as all councillors across this room, not just the Conservative administration, to ensure we represent our residents in a fiscally responsible manner and that we recognise the financial challenges we, in common with other authorities, face, which includes considerable volatility on a number of factors affecting local government finances, not least inflationary pressures. Not wishing to minimise that challenge, the budget I am proposing tonight for Rochford District Council would be the envy of many councils across England and Wales, and some much closer to home here in Essex. Members, you will have read the detailed reports covering items 3 and 4 of our agenda tonight. What we have before you tonight are significant. A balanced budget with no funding gap and therefore no need to have any subsidy from reserves. No debt, no interest payments, no capital repayments, no lending, no cuts to services, support to the financially vulnerable within our community through council tax support and hardship funding, community grants, capital investment in our buildings estate, a commitment to make the Mill Arts and Events Centre in Raleigh a jewel in the crown for local residents, as well as developing community and office facilities in the Freight House in Rochford. We have excellent leisure facilities in both Clements Hall and Raleigh Leisure Centres, and we are proposing a significantly less than inflation proposal to increase council tax by 2.97%, equivalent to £7.29 per year, or put another way, an extra 14 pence per week on a Band D property. Under my leadership, this council has striven to ensure transparency in the way we conduct our business. I should like at this point to thank Naomi Lucas, the former Section 151 officer, and more recently Tim Lewis, our current Interim Director of Resources, for all the briefings they have given to all members in this council to support and help understanding on the complex subject of council finances. As I now turn to the slides, I genuinely believe there's a lot to be positive about, and I'll be highlighting some of our successes. But I also want to be honest about some of the challenges and to explain that to govern is to choose, and there are serious consequences resulting from those choices. If I can turn first of all to the second slide, please. Thank you. This time last year, we balanced the budget for 2022 to 23, but had a predicted budget gap in 23-24 and 24-25. But the pay award in 2022 turned out to be a lot higher than we thought. We had assumed 2%, and that was a reasonable assumption at that time, but the £1,925 paid to every employee added around 7% to the pay bill. We also hadn't anticipated Russia's invasion of Ukraine 2 days after we set the budget. This clearly had a major effect on inflation. Despite this, through careful financial management, we are forecasting to more or less break even this financial year. But inflation will have a large impact on next year's budget. If we can turn to slide 3, please. Now, I appreciate there's not much chance, unless you've got super eyesight, of being able to read that, but all the details are in the pack. But I just want to remind members that we have a business plan, and we talk about our key achievements, and all these points are under our business plan. So if we go from left to right, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but we established with great success the Rochford North's joint venture to deliver waste collection and street cleansing services. We carried on with the progression of the One Team partnership with Brentwood Borough Council, which for our authority gives us the opportunity to achieve economies of scale through those benefits, opportunity and resilience. We're progressing 4 major Connect projects to improve efficiency and delivery. We have worked hard to support our residents with a cost of living campaign, which has been acknowledged by others independent to this authority as actually leading the way in how this council is supporting residents through the cost of living campaign. We've invested £100,000 in the Hockley Woods play space, another £100,000 of investment in Hockley Woods car park, and the purchase of £2.2 million of refuse vehicles with enhanced pedestrian and cycle safety. We've delivered, or are in the process of delivering, copies of Rochford District Matters to every household in the district. And that was certainly in response to many residents talking to us about the need to find out what the council and recognise that not everyone wants to do this digitally. Sometimes they appreciate something coming through their front door, and that's a magazine which is arriving on doormats as we speak. If we can turn to the next slide, thank you. As I said earlier, there's lots of uncertainty about inflation as well as the government's plans that affect local government. For example, the planned changes to the business rate system and new homes bonus, as well as the way that waste is managed. Our proposed budget is for a small contribution to reserves next year. Compared to this time last year, there have been large swings in both income and expenditure when setting the 2023-24 budget, but it is a balanced budget. It does depend on a council tax increase of 2.97%, as set out in the report. This, as I said earlier, equates to only 14 pence per week on a Band D property, and Rochford's is the lowest percentage increase of all the preceptors. Although any increase in council tax places an additional burden on households, it is modest when compared to inflation, and that inflation has had a significant impact on the council's own expenditure. The contribution to reserves is needed because we have a general fund balance, or working balance, that we seek to maintain at 10% of net revenue expenditure. The £50,000 contribution to reserves will enable this working balance to be kept at £1.2 million, which equates to 10%. As the slide shows, we aim to keep this reserve topped up to maintain it roughly at the required level. If we can move to the next slide, please, which picks up on the major budget pressures and savings. We should celebrate the fact, as I said earlier, that unlike many councils, we're not talking about cuts to services. There has been no need to go through an exercise to salami slice savings in services. Instead, the way we plan to deliver savings over the next 3 years is primarily through our strategic partnership with Brentwood Borough Council. The partnership is designed to increase the resilience of services whilst also delivering financial savings through the economies of scale. Every organisation can be more efficient, and we in Rochford are no different. By working with Brentwood, we aim to learn from them and others, as well as show them what we do well, so they can learn from us. The new shared teams will deliver services more efficiently, but always preserving the sovereignty of this council. We have been able to reduce the amount we pay into our pension fund each year by £395,000, based on the latest valuation of the fund. This is true of most councils. It is good news, but I don't claim credit for this, just as I can't be blamed for some of the extra cost pressures due to external factors. We have also benefited from business rates revaluations worth £680,000 and the new homes bonus of £840,000. What definitely is down to this council's good financial management is that we predict an extra £250,000 income from investments. These are very safe investments. What this shows is that rising interest rates, rather than being a cost and a risk to our finances, are actually good news in the sense that we can earn more from our cash holdings. But of course, we know that higher interest rates, as well as inflation increases, the cost of living to our residents and businesses. This is why we have continued the support through our cost of living response. For example, Council last week agreed financial help to council taxpayers. Apart from the cost pressures on pay and inflation, we have included an extra provision in the budget to keep open the Mill Arts and Events Centre. We have also included the cost of food waste separation, which was reported again to Council last week. So if we can go through the next few slides, and again, under our business plan, our financial sustainability, and I think, as I said, this is all in the report, but hopefully members can read that. Do you want me to read it out? Does that? No, I'm getting nods. Don't need to. Right, okay. I'll leave you for a few moments to absorb that. And if we can move on to the early intervention slide, please. And move on to maximising our assets. And the next slide, to enable communities. I believe we've actually got some paper copies, a limited number here tonight, but certainly more copies can be made available for everyone of this presentation.
Nothing against Councillor Wootton, but are these slides any different to what we've read in the paperwork? I cannot read them. I think the council is aware of my colour blindness, and the white's merging into the whatever colour it's on, which I don't know. So if this is fundamental to the vote, I need a paper copy. If it's what I've read already in the reports, I've read it. That's all.
Apologies to members. And
there some more copies for the councillors, please, on this side? Can you make sure the councillors have a copy? That's more important. If you could pass it on, that would be helpful. Members of the public, could you please just pass them on to the other councillors that need a copy? Just for the debate, would be helpful. Okay. Has everybody got a copy that needs a copy? Okay, members, I'll get Councillor Wootton to move on then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate I'm picking out the highlights, but all of these details are actually in the report which has been circulated under item 3 tonight. In terms of the capital strategy, this slide is a summary of Appendix 2 of the report. The capital programme is enabling many of the ambitions that I've just been talking about. We have major investment planned, £2 million for our waste services and £4.2 million for the asset development programme. All this expenditure needs to be funded. Many councils would borrow to fund their capital programme because they don't have the reserves. We do. We have some capital receipts along with the hard-soft infrastructure reserve and the investment reserve. Here is one of those choices that I spoke about earlier. Should we borrow £4 million and keep the £4 million in reserves for something else? This council for many years has decided not to borrow, and I am proud to have continued that policy. That is not to say that we should not rule out borrowing forever to fund the right project, one that offers genuine long-term savings or secures long-term income that can cover the principal and interest payments on the debt. If I talk in particular about the Community Safety Fund, last year and the year before we made provision for £100,000 to be given to town and parish councils on a matched funding basis. The majority of the share was going to go to Rayleigh Town Council for them to develop their CCTV project. For various reasons, not least the procurement vagaries of local government, it hasn't been possible for us to deliver that. So we are stopping for the next year that £100,000, but instead making £120,000 available to develop CCTV across our district, but starting in Rayleigh. We know that is something that the residents have called for, and we agree. And using our partner with Brentwood Borough Council, who already have a CCTV unit, we can actually piggyback on the back of that network to drive in CCTV in Rayleigh, and I'm hoping that can be rolled out to other parts of our district over time. That is what the £120,000 is for, but it is also a community safety budget for us to look at enforcement, look at neighbourhood watch schemes, look at street pastor schemes, and generally look at areas of community safety within our district. We also plan to make available up to £1,000 to each parish council, and of course Rayleigh Town Council, towards an event to celebrate the King's coronation in May. And also under the capital strategy, we've also been able to protect the street ranger service that was operated by Essex County Council. So if we look at the next slide, I thought this would be quite a good slide to put in there because it very graphically shows the proportion of the overall council tax precept that Rochford actually takes. It is 12%. We are the collection authority for all authorities, Essex County Council, Essex Fire, Police and Crime Commissioner, town and parish councils, and of course ourselves. Our share of that is 12%, 2.97%, £7.29. We always use a band D as the 100%, if you like, property that we quote. So their council tax, their element from Rochford District Council will increase from £245.16 to £252.45. So I thought that would be a good slide to show. And if we come back to the next slide, which is simply the budget headlines that I've been through, 2.97% increase in council tax, no service reductions, continuing to support the most vulnerable in the district, no debt, a corporate strategy delivery to build on the strategic partnership with Brentwood, and future years' uncertainty that has to be acknowledged, but a balanced medium-term financial strategy. So that, members, completes the slides, but I will finish off by saying I'm proud to be presenting this budget to you tonight. There are very many councils across the country that are facing far tougher decisions than ours, perhaps because they have suffered an unexpected financial hit or because they have not managed their financial affairs as well as Rochford. We will all know of a few that are having to seek external help, with big decisions being taken out of their hands because of their financial predicament. A defining feature of this and previous budgets is to remain debt-free. As I have said, I am open to the principle of borrowing, sound borrowing, for the right project. But let's celebrate the fact that we have no debt. We have been able to inject £250,000 into service delivery next year as a direct result of that policy, due to higher interest rates. Those same higher interest rates would, for example, add about £250,000 costs to our budget if we borrowed instead of using our reserves to fund the capital programme. That's £250,000 every year for 40 to 50 years. Perhaps we don't have an exotic portfolio of out-of-district investments or a £100 million flagship scheme, but I believe we are super ambitious to keep providing excellent services to our residents at a reasonable cost. That may not attract the attention of the national media, but I believe it is what the people of Rochford want from their local authority. I commend this budget to the council. I want to lead a council which is creative and innovative, a council with opportunity, a council with vision and ambition, all in the interests of the communities we serve. The evidence is already there and history speaks for itself. The work the council is able to achieve is underpinned by sound strategic financial planning and robust financial management, which our administration will continue over the course of the next financial year and beyond. I therefore propose, Mr. Chairman, the recommendations set out in item 3, paragraph 17, page 3.23. I propose those recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And is there a second for that motion?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to second those proposals. And if I may just say a few words. Thank you. Firstly, members will have seen a rise in most fees and charges within this budget, bringing Rochford in line nationally. Most of them are in line with inflation. I am, however, pleased to say that car parking charges have not been increased at all, and neither have any cemetery charges. I think this is good news for residents. As portfolio holder for climate, finance and economy, I'm exceptionally proud of the work this council has done to support our local businesses over the past year, and delighted that we have been able to provide a budget to allow this vital work for our economy to continue. Along with the ambitious task of becoming carbon neutral by 2030, I'm pleased that we have made funds available for our ideas, and more importantly, to employ a sustainability officer to ensure the ideas are able to come to fruition. In summary, and as Councillor Wootton has already set out, for an additional 14 pence per week, not only can we prevent any cuts to services, but we have actually set out a plan to increase them, along with our resources, to keep improving the service for our residents. I'm pleased to second these motions. Thank you.
The first person I have that wishes to speak to this is Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you. I would like firstly to thank Councillor Wootton for his detailed I can move it much closer, how's that? I'll try and move it up as well. Yeah. Firstly, I would like to thank Councillor Wootton for his detailed report, but I have concerns with some aspects. As people say, the devil is in the detail. According to officers, and comparing previous budgets and reports, the capital programme for the Asset Development Programme has reduced by 1.5 million as a result of funding for the Mill Hall being removed in light of the decision not to develop it, a reassessment of what was required for other elements of the Asset Development Programme, including a reduced amount for the Freight House redevelopment. £622,000 was added to the revenue budget to fund payment to GB partnerships. So the reduction in the ADP between 2023 budget and the 23-24 budget was not redeployed. The Asset Development Programme is currently being reviewed to reflect the revised investment strategy, so it is too early to specify how the 4.2 million will be spent. The 4.2 million in the capital programme is a provision that is available to fund the revised asset strategy, which will be presented to Council at a future date. The uncertainty and lack of proper project plan that accords with the financial position now being made leads me to find it difficult to support this aspect of the budget. Add the proposed increases of 50,000 to general reserves and 290,000 to earmarked reserves for investments at a time when our residents are suffering unprecedented cost of living increases. And looking at the overall figures, they appear positive until you appreciate the impact on individual households. I believe that this budget will create further hardship to many members of our community, and therefore, with reluctance, I cannot and will not support it. Thank you.
Next person on my list is Councillor Wilkinson.
Hear me if oh, that's better. You can hear me now. Chairman, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the leader and his administration for the time and the effort it's obviously taken to prepare a budget. It's obviously incumbent on the administration to do so, and it's not lost on me the efforts that are taken to do this. My history of voting this time of year will dictate that actually, historically, I've supported this the stance, and the reason for that has always been the fact that I recognise the fact that as costs increase, our council costs increase, therefore our income needs to increase in line with it. So I've never had a problem with it. Equally, the other reason I've never had a problem with it in the past is because there's always been investment. The last couple of years it's been in CCTV. There was the year before last there was this extra £100,000 put to one side for investment within community safety projects. Now, when I looked at this budget today, when I looked at these yesterday rather, to try and work my way through the figures, I tried to work out, and I did speak to the Interim Director for Resources about this yesterday. We had a meeting where I tried to get some clarification of figures, and I thank you very much for your time you spent, as to why there's an increase from the usual 2% to 2.97%. And the reason I can see is because the government's allowed us to, because the autumn statement, the Chancellor has allowed us to increase council tax further than we ever have in the past without a referendum. Okay, well, if we're going to do that, why are we doing it? Well, the way I see the reason we're doing this is because it's to put extra £70,000 into our reserves. I know the figure of £50,000 was mentioned, but I was told that this would bring in £250,000 of council tax. We usually get 180 of a 2% rise, so that's additional £70,000 going into reserves. It's not going into any project, it's going into reserves. There's no way on earth we can support taking an extra £70,000 after our residents' pockets simply just to put in our reserves at all. Now, there are some aspects of this report that I agree with, and I think that there's a lot of good in it, but I think that you need to pick, as Councillor Mrs Mason said, you need to pick the detail out of it. The leader talked about good financial management, and yes, there is a lot of good financial management which goes on with this council, there is, but equally there's some bad as well. And there's been some wasted money, as yet still undisclosed amount of wasted money that went to GB Partnerships for the failure of the contract to do with the building we're currently standing in. That would have a bearing on the budget that we are being asked to consider today. And I don't see how the 80,000 residents of this district could be asked to fund that mistake, which is essentially what's being asked. And so therefore, whilst I do agree with a rise, I always have, our costs are going up. I accept the fact that our income needs to go up with it. I cannot support an increase, what's being suggested, where part of it is simply going to go into reserves and not being spent. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Foster, you did indicate.
Thank you, Chairman. The largest number of complaints I receive from residents relate to planning and enforcement. Can you please confirm that the proposed budget is sufficient to enable the recruitment of experienced planners to boost the performance in the planning and enforcement department? Thank you.
Councillor Foster, to whom are you asking that question?
Thank you, Chairman. To the portfolio holder for strategic planning.
Thank you, Chairman. In regards to that particular question, we are looking to begin a performance management service review in March. We have a budget in place and reasonable needs identified in the upcoming review. The Connect project will greatly support the planning department, leading to a better, improved service for all our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Cripps.
Hear me? I apologise in advance because what I've got to say will slightly cross over Mrs Mason's point, but in a different vein. I've been through the medium-term financial report a number of times, and it seems to be a game of two halves. There's about 50% of the budget is everyday council supply delivery and general goings on for the council. That is supported in the report by an in-depth cost explanation via various charts and addenda. The schedule is also illustrated by right up front by 1 fiscal year but 3 years looking ahead, considered as the medium term. And section 13 deals with numerous risks. It's a risk register basically. It's alarmingly large, but I have to say the mitigation measures are explained in some detail, and it does address contingency and various moves that can be made to offset some of the what might happen. And there seems to be an alarming number of unknowns, unsures, and could change issues. So that goes along with Councillor Wootton's point about councils being up against it financially at the moment. So I think that was pretty well covered in that respect, cost, schedule and risk management. Conversely, the other half of the budget, 50% of the budget, is capital projects. That doesn't meet that criteria at all. So I'd like to go down the bottom of the document to section 14, which talks about the robustness of the budget estimate and all the various criteria that needs to be met and so on. One of which is the financial officer reporting and updating this strategy quarterly to directors taking part in a 6-monthly review, and then ultimately all the leadership team on an annual basis. So if I roll back up again to the capital budget, the new waste treatment project, it says 1.7 million, so it's big enough to worry about it. I don't see any schedule there, any milestones or any risk management not mentioned. The mill hall gets a mention, but there's no money, time or risk associated with that, because what it's saying is that a new outline business case is required, and that in itself would start to introduce cost, schedule and risk, but it's not there at the moment, so I see that as vulnerable. Likewise, the ADP project gets 2 different mentions in the write-up, and the sum of 4.2 million appears to be the residual amount of the original OBC redeployed or left over. But neither reference acknowledges the independent audit that was carried out some months ago, who summarised in 5 points, 3 critical, 2 urgent. That completely would change the scope of that statement, I believe. And therefore, its overall, in a nutshell, its overall reference was it needs to be relooked at and a new OBC. And again, the outline business case would introduce cost, schedule and risk. At the moment, on all those 3 major projects, which make up about 50% of the budget, none of those things are in place. So I would suggest, respectfully, that the financial officer, who's got to face the music 4 times a year, plus a half year and a full year, really needs to set some milestone deadlines for the OBC for the mill hall to be submitted, for the OBC for the ADP to be submitted, and for the recently sanctioned 1.7 million waste, then that's currently missing the schedule and the risks. So I think dates should be set in the near future as deadlines to be met for that information. Otherwise, I don't feel comfortable with a very good half budget and a not very good other half budget. That leaves me not with a lot of confidence. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
Mr. Willis, do you wish to respond to any of those points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's useful that can you hear me? Yep. Can you hear me now?
I think just a bit nearer.
It's pretty close. It's helpful that the councillor mentioned the section 14, which is the piece that I write as the council's statutory finance officer to give reassurance to all members that vote on the budget, that I can say professionally that the amount of reserves that are set out in the report are sufficient, and that the budgeting process is adequate. And I'll cover those 2 areas. First of all, the level of reserves. And I will take this opportunity, if I may, to respond in part to Councillor Wilkinson, as he mentioned also this section. The current policy of the council is to set aside 10% of net revenue expenditure, as the leader indicated in his presentation, that covers our working balance. That working balance, which is 1.2 million, that equates to on a £12 million budget, is there in case of emergencies. And section 13 refers to some of those risks that could give rise to emergencies, which means we need to tap into resources urgently. You will see in the report that we're only just about at that level on working balances. We're only just about at 1.2 million at the 10% of net revenue expenditure forecast for next year and beyond. Any income generation, including the recommended council tax increase, reflects the need to make sure that that balance is sufficient in accordance with existing policy, which has underpinned some of my recommendations in the assurance statement that I've provided to the council. Of course, 50,000 here matched to a £70,000 saving on only a 2% increase in council tax is, you can match a number of different figures throughout the report and say you could do that or you might not want to do that, not necessarily council tax and reserves contribution. And that's a political decision for the council to make. But what I would say is that if a justification for reducing income in the budget is we don't need to put so much into reserves, we do need that 50,000 contribution forecast for next year into the working balance to maintain the 10% threshold, which is set out in my section 14 of the report. Just coming on to the second issue, I think in terms of the analysis of risk and the lack of detail in relation to the capital programme, really, I think was the main issue. And the lack of detail around how the capital programme is going to be spent and what the risks might be attached to that programme. I think there's some validity to that because typically with revenue budgets as opposed to capital budgets, revenue budgets are ongoing year in, year out type of spending like on salaries and maintenance. We have a lot more certainty about the type of things we're going to spend that money on because it's the same things we spent the money on this year and last year. Whereas the capital programme is by its nature projects. They're things that we aspire to do, which could be new and we've not done before. And to a greater or lesser extent, we have an idea of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But quite often, in respect to the capital programme, we don't know that. And what we put in front of you for a programme over the next 3 years, there is a degree of uncertainty as to how we will go about delivering on those projects. Specifications need to be written, procurements need to be carried out. And what typically happens with the capital programme, and we've found this in recent years, is there's lots of other things that happen that causes uncertainty, not just the ones that might be within our own control, the risks that we could generate ourselves, but also things like inflation. The longer it takes to deliver a project, inflation has a bigger and bigger impact. The issues with lack of materials and labour has meant that there's been a lot of capital programme slippage, which means we don't spend what we think we're going to spend. So what I'm outlining are some of the risks attached to the capital programme that are not just about not knowing exactly how we're going to spend the capital programme that is in front of members tonight. I'm relatively relaxed about the fact that the report as it's presented doesn't have that level of detail in relation to the programme, the capital programme projects, because that's not untypical at this stage in the process of budget approval and the medium-term financial strategy. Thank you.
Very quickly, Mr. Cripps. Councillor Cripps, sorry.
Hello, are you there? Okay. Yeah, I hear what you say, but the threat we're under across the board is markedly demonstrated in section 13. It's right across the board. That will affect projects equally as anything else. And in any event, the size of the money we're talking here, it's 50% of the budget. I believe that a project should have a budget which has a built-in contingency, and the responsibility for that budget is to come in under that budget or at least not above the contingency. Now that starts with an OBC, which will give you the first high-level cost, schedule and risk list. You've now got a degree...
Councillor Cripps, if you've got a point you wish to have clarified, please go ahead. But you've had your time. Unless you've got a point of clarification, then I'll ask you to sit down.
Okay, I'll reiterate my point. I believe the financial officer should be setting a deadline for when he gets the OBCs outstanding and the information outstanding, such that his reports can start to monitor and reflect what's going on in projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cripps. Members, can I remind you that it is 5 minutes. It is being timed, so please make sure you stick to your 5 minutes. Next person I have on the list is Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. From the leader's comments about the CCTV, can I ask him to assure that the money that was put forward of last year will be carried forward this year to Rayleigh Town Council and what they want in the district? Not what RDC want in the district, but RTC want in the district. And that is to work with a company that they believe is the right company to work with. Not the 120,000 that's going to go towards Brentwood's ideas of CCTV or anybody else's ideas. It's RTC that have been working on this for considerable time. And I am one of those that's been working on it and trying to get this moved forward as quickly as possible. And we are dedicated to putting CCTV in Rayleigh High Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Wootton, would you care to respond to that?
Thank you, Chairman. There has been ongoing work with RDC and RTC. In fact, the Community Safety Officer, Mr. Parkman, has spent a huge amount of time working with various partners to look at a scheme. So I don't think there's any difference between what RTC would like and what RDC. Surely the answer is that we have a robust system which serves the community and does its job. What that job looks like, I don't know, but certainly you're suggesting there might be a divide. There's not a divide at all. It is doing the job that is required. But if I didn't make it absolutely clear, what is happening is there is no residual funding left from that £100,000 other than to those parish councils who have genuinely started a project, and certainly we wouldn't withdraw the funding if they're really at contractual stage or whatever of implementing a particular scheme. My understanding that is not the case with CCTV. That was the project that RTC were working on, and what we're actually doing is not lining the pockets of our partner Brentwood at all. What we're actually saying is we will actually meet all the capital funding costs to install CCTV, a good system. We will work with our partner. Obviously, there is a cost. It doesn't really matter whether that cost goes within our partnership or whether it passes out to an external contractor. Actually, if you ask me, I'd prefer that it stays within the partnership so that we can all benefit from that. But I'm not precious about it. The real thing is to produce a system for Rayleigh that works, that is a robust system, and certainly there is no difference. Well, the difference is, instead of 75% of the capital cost to RTC, RDC will pick up 100% of the costs, and the only commitment really for RTC, and for that matter any other parish council, if they want it, they will meet the ongoing revenue costs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Stanley, can I remind you, it is just for a point of clarification.
Yes, I understand that. From what our leader has said, that RDC will meet 100% of the capital costs and the management side will be down to RTC. I understand that. What I am asking really is that the benefits of the company that we are deliberating with far outweigh the benefits of the company that he is talking about. And Andrew Paddon hasn't been, hasn't been with us at all. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those points have been noted. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support this budget that has been right, and I'm very proud of what we have achieved, and especially obtaining...
Councillor Shaw, can you keep the mic?
Oh, sorry, I thought it sounded like I was echoing, sorry. And especially obtaining monies for taking on the Vital Rangers service. Thank you to our members and officers involved. Thank you.
Councillor Eaves is next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. 3 points, if I may. First of all, when we are looking at the section or page 3.8, the second paragraph down, we have there the statement that we are looking at of a 2.9% increase in council tax with a assumed increase of 2% annually after that. And everyone that has been speaking about increases in costs has been saying that we expect the increases in costs to be considerable in the future. So I'm intrigued to know why it is that we're working on a 2% in future years when everything that's been said tonight would indicate that that would be considerably more than that. That's my first point. Secondly, in the risks list, there's no mention of the risk around devolution. There obviously is going to be a risk on that because we do not know how that is going to pan out at the moment. And I know colloquially that a certain government minister has said that there is no more money in the pot. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one works out. Third point is directed at assets. When the leader very eloquently brought the presentation to us, in the capital strategy, under IT, tourism and parking, we have a figure of 150,000. Now, knowing the sort of money that has been spent on IT and parking, it leaves very little for tourism. Now, far from being visionary, this is actually woeful when you consider the amount of history that is in this area. Until recently, the portion of the website, the council's website, actually under tourism, had one item on there. It was an event that was 3 years ago. And although it has been updated, the update doesn't actually give us much more to actually hang on to. So my question there would be, how do we see tourism developing on the amount of money that is actually allocated in the budget? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Willis, did you wish to respond to those points?
Thank you, Chair. The first 2 points, perhaps the third one, somebody else will pick up. The first point, Councillor, is about we assume 2% council tax increases in 24-5 and 25-6. The increase in council tax is limited by the threshold that applies, above which the council would have to hold a referendum to increase by greater than the threshold. In previous recent years, it's been 2% for a number of years. For 23-24, it was 3% exceptionally. The government, in its recognition of extremely high costs that the councils across the land were facing, they allowed council tax for lower tier authorities to go up 3% without a referendum rather than 2%. So we're anticipating prudently that that threshold will come back down after next year to 2%, as it's been for many years up until 23-24. We could put in a larger increase, but then that would assume that the council wanted to vote for a referendum, and then the people of Rochford voted in favour of a large council tax increase. But we didn't think that was a wise position to take for the projections for the medium-term financial strategy. In relation to the risk on devolution, yes, I guess there is a risk attached to devolution. The reason why it's not there is because it's not a large enough risk that we can quantify at this stage. The difficulty with risks is there are some risks which have such a major impact that the organisation ceases to exist. Devolution is almost in that category. It's relatively remote, and what you need to do if you want to provide a commentary on risk, never mind think about how you're going to mitigate the impact of that risk, is to assess how likely it is and what type of financial impact, because this is obviously a budget report, so the risks are related to finances, that devolution, for example, would have. And there are obviously risks around devolution regarding political control and democratic accountability. In terms of financial risks of what we know as Rochford District Council now, it's quite difficult to assess what those risks are and how we would reduce the likelihood of those risks and reduce the impact of those things if they became manifest. And that's why that's not on the list.
Councillor Belton, did you want to come back on the tourism point?
Yes, I will do, and then I'll see Councillor FD may want to make comment too as portfolio holder. Completely agree with Councillor Eaves. We have got a vibrant district. We have a wealth of culture, history and heritage here, and we should be working with that to bring people into the district and for our residents. As per reports that have come in front of this council over the last couple of months, we have the Shared Prosperity Fund, a large proportion of which is going towards tourism over the next 3 financial years, including this one. And we also have the Community Investment Plan, which culture, heritage and tourism plays a part in. So there is already a budget in place specifically for tourism, where members and stakeholders can have an input into what those projects look like over this financial and the next 2 financial years. So whilst there may not be anything specific within the capital programme, we have 2 specific pots of money with earmarked funds to go towards culture, tourism, heritage for our Rochford district.
Councillor FD, did you wish to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Eaves. Again, as Councillor Belton says, I've been quite bullish in trying to push for some extra funding from tourism. We've been very underfunded over the last few years, and we've got to have quite a sizable chunk of the Shared Prosperity Fund, and hopefully something will be coming very soon, because we've got to spend the first lump of it before March. So I'll be happy to take questions when we get nearer the time, another council meeting, or if you're interested, I'll set up an online meeting so we can discuss it then. Thank you.
Councillor Hoy, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is my 13th budget meeting at Rochford, and I would just like to say it's a very different budget process this year to pre-COVID years. Pre-COVID, we were able to contribute ideas openly through the budget away day process under Chatham House rules. I'm sure the chairman remember those days, he was there then, and I felt those days at that point we had a better budget process. We all understood what was happening much more. So I find it much more difficult working under this process. I'd also like to say there's a lack of clarity on how amendments should be put to this budget meeting, because obviously they were rarely done before because we agreed it beforehand. I would ask officers, can they look at Essex County Council, where the budget process and the amendment process is very clear and works very, very well. I'm sure other county councillors here will agree with that. Turning to the budget itself, I'm not going to say too much about it because I've got something else to do instead. With regard to the savings, we've got an investment income of 250,000 mentioned, and pension revaluation of 395,000 as contributing to our savings. I'd just like to point out these aren't in the council's control. These are outside effect. Also for openness, I perhaps should declare that I'm a member of the Essex County Council Pension Board, so we'll have some effect on the pension revaluation there where we decide on the investments. So perhaps it's a bit of luck as well that we have that. And I'd also like to say that I don't disagree with everything in the budget. And there's a possibly what we might call a scary possibility that some of us on this side may be more in control of the budget next year, and maybe it's not something we are actually looking forward to that much because I know it's a difficult process. I just want to turn to reserves. General reserves are up by £200,000, and as I said last year, guidance from SIPFA suggests it should be around 5 to 10%, and I think we should aim for the lower amount. I'm aware that Tim Willis would probably say he wants to aim for the higher amount, but it's a matter of opinion and where your risk is. As has been said as well, I think he's admitted it, that the increase in council tax is just putting money into our general reserves, and I don't think that's appropriate at this time. It's also something that Councillor Wilkinson also said. I think the reserves are there not for potential loss of income, because we're not like a business, we're a council. We will exist in some form, hopefully, for the foreseeable future, unless we end up like Thurrock. So it's not a risk of loss of income, it's a risk of a project failure. I think we want those reserves high for, and I think that's what is being done, and I don't agree we should be in that position. So I think the reserves are too high and they should be closer to 5% than 10%. And I just remember about, I know I've got to mention it, I'm sorry, Councillor Wootton, but I just mentioned again about just one of our earmarked reserves is down to £622,000 due to a payment we had to make to GB Partnerships. So perhaps we're not that financially or fiscally responsible as we might like to think. However, I'm now going to turn to some amendments which I've put through Tim Willis, and I know Andrew Hunkin has given his view, but I'm going to still put them, and perhaps in a slightly different way, which he might find acceptable. So as the Independent and Green Group, we're putting forward 3 amendments to the budget, or 3 items for the budget. 1, to assist those in need most during the cost of living crisis, to provide them with a subsidy of £80 for ease of identification. Everyone on the LCTS, which is the Local Council Tax Support Scheme, would receive this amount. This is not to be seen as part of the LCTS scheme, but as a method for identifying people and making payments to them. The cost is £291,200 and we're paid for out of general reserves. As I said, this could be done because reserves are too high. 2, this is one which possibly isn't too easy to explain to people who are not aware about park homes, but in Holbridge we have most of the park home sites in the district. Park home site fees are to go up by 14.1% rather than 11.1% proposed. The site fees form part of the pitch fees, and the site owners have already put the pitch fees up by 14.1%, so I think we should match their fees. Otherwise, they're making more money out of the residents, and I think it's appropriate to do that. 3, councillors can claim, the proposal is that councillors can claim only one special responsibility allowance. At the moment, they can claim multiple ones. This will obviously have a budgetary effect with a reduction in the amount paid overall to councillors. However, I am happy, given what Andrew Hunkin said to me earlier, that this proposal could be referred to the Constitutional Working Group if that's acceptable. Finally, and this is for officers as well, we were going to propose a freeze to Mill Hall prices. However, there is some confusion among users of the hall who say prices have gone up whilst officers say they are lower. Can it just be please explain? I'm getting reports that people say that they used to pay £350 and now they're paying £417, and the officer said it used to be £500. So I'd just like some clarity on that. Thank you.
Councillor Hoy, can you just confirm for me your amendments are in addition to the recommendations as shown on page 3.24, or
Yes.
are they amending existing?
They're in addition.
They're additions.
Because they're changing the budgetary amounts.
Okay,
Yes.
and do you have a seconder for that? Sorry, I can see somebody's hand, I can't see who it is.
It's Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Could we ask the officers if while we're still debating they could get those on the board?
Yeah. Officers, with regards to those amendments, we're going to have to refer to those in a second or two. Is there any possibility we can get them up on the board? There's a challenge for you. Good. Okay. Hang on a second, Councillor Hoy. You had a third question there with regards to fees. Who can answer that question? With regards to the hall fees? Regards to the hall fees? The Councillor Hoy asked.
Yes, I can answer that. Thank you, Chair. In the same way that I answered it by email today to Councillor Hoy. The specific charge that he was referring to, the information I have is that Fusion were levying charges in relation to Mill Hall when they were running it on our behalf. And as such an organisation, they added VAT to their charges. When we were presenting this report with the proposals in relation to fees and charges for Mill Hall, what we've done is remove the VAT because we consider those charges to be exempt which means we don't charge VAT as a public body. And that means that, like for like, they have the 20% excluded from the fee. So from the customer's point of view, they're paying less. But in reality, to the recipient, there's no change in the absolute amount of income. In relation to that specific item, the weekends 4 to 8 hours fee for Mill Hall, Main Hall, was £500 by Fusion, and it's £417 by the council from 23/4. That's the proposal, and that is excluding the 20% that was previously added on. I understand Councillor Hoy is saying that was £350, not £500, but the information I have is that was £500. That was one of about 20 different elements of charge, and I'm not clear whether or not Councillor Hoy is challenging all of those previous charges or just that specific one, but I've responded to him individually on that specific one, which I've repeated tonight. While I have the mic, shall I?
If you can bear with me just a second. We've got all of the amendments on. Okay. Members, we need to take the amendments first. I do have a couple of other people who wish to speak to the main point, but I think they're up on the screen. I can't really see it.
Yeah, they're bigger now.
Okay, right. Right, we're just putting a list together, so please, there's a couple over there. Councillor Webb. Yeah, Councillor Mrs. Belton. Okay, Councillor Hoy, can I just ask you to confirm what is on the screen? You may need to come down and have a closer look, is what your amendments are.
Essentially, yes, that's the same. I would point out on bullet point 1, it's LCTS, not CLTS. That's all.
Okay. Okay, right. Okay, now speaking to the amendment and the amendment only, Councillor Wilkinson.
They do it.
Right, let's stick your 5p in the meter.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
That's better. You can
gotcha.
hear me. It's more of a question, Chairman, actually, and it's via yourself, if I may. It's for Councillor Hoy. Just to confirm those three amendments, you say they're in addition to the proposals in item F. I assume then that includes the inclusion item F, item 3, sorry, that includes the proposal at number F, which is the increase of 2.97%, because you've not amended that at all. So
I'm not amending that one.
Okay, right, that's why I understand that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Webb.
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say I support Councillor Hoy with Amendment 1, recognising that there is still need in our district. I believe there's other groups in this district that would benefit from a discretionary payment of some sort. My only concern is in terms of, do we need to actually do some more work to look at this figure? Is this the correct figure? Should we be looking at a different figure? And is this the right group to actually give that funding to, as they're already receiving some additional funding? So I would like to ask that we actually look at setting up a short task and finish group, cross-party, to look at which groups do we need to support within the district. And then I would ask that we actually find some money from reserves to make that happen. I don't know that the figure can be agreed tonight, maybe it can be, but I'm certainly supportive of Amendment 1 in some way, shape or form. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mrs. Belton.
Thank you, Chairman. So on Amendment 1, much like Councillor Webb has just set out, absolutely agree with the principle of a support grant. I don't necessarily agree with giving a grant to those receiving the council tax support scheme that we voted on last week. Those people are getting that grant, an additional £25 from central government, and can benefit from the extraordinary hardship fund that we set up. And much like Councillor Michael Webb has just set out, there are other groups in this district that may benefit, And when I spoke with Councillor Hoy on this item, the £80 is just a figure. There's no meat to those bones per se. And I would support further work being done to identify who in the district needs extra support and what that support looks like, as opposed to just choosing a figure and a group of people to give additional support to. So that's my views on that one. On the second amendment, I fully agree with Councillor Hoy's suggestion, and I thank him for bringing it to our attention. As a councillor that deals with park homes more than most of us, he has the knowledge, and I welcome that advice, and I would support him on that one. In regards to the third, I don't think that's something that we should be voting on here. We all have a pecuniary interest in it. I fully support a review of allowances, and I'm told that we actually have a review due this year, because it's done every 4 years. The last time there was a review in 2019, we took on every recommendation of that independent body, good and bad. The recommendations were taken on. So I would ask that that recommendation, well, I couldn't support that recommendation this evening because it's for an independent body to review this year anyway and make the determined suggestions. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Hoy, I completely agree with all three of your proposed amendments. I think going back to your earlier statement about previous budget away days, although they were never attended by all of the opposition, I know you did, and if you had been able to come and bring this to the table earlier, we would probably have this included because it obviously gains support. I agree with Councillor Webb that the finer detail of the amounts might need to be looked at. Your recommendation 3, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Although we do have an independent review, we don't have to go with what they suggest. They might like to give us more money, but we don't have to take it. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I can't get in now. I haven't broken it.
Okay. Councillor Eves.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very quick point on item 1. It has been suggested that there be more work done on this. As has been mentioned many times on these kind of things, could we put a timescale on it, please? I would venture to suggest that before Purdah would be a good one to aim for. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a comment regarding point 1, regarding the LCTS. Yeah, I've just got a query regarding the £80 payment and for what use that will go to. I think people have had, maybe not enough, but certain people have had quite a large amount of support from the government already. I fully agree with what Councillor Webb said, and if he would like to formalise his proposal, I would be really happy to second, because I think that would be really good to actually look what we can do for our local residents. I totally agree with the Task and Finish group. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Wilson, we can't take another proposal at this stage, so bear with us a second or two. Right, does anybody else wish to speak to these amendments? Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Sorry, I will get the hang of this eventually. Can we take an amendment instead? Is that allowed?
No, we need to deal with this particular amendment first.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hoy.
I just want to refer to the £80.
Okay, thank you.
This was work I did in July last year with Naomi Lucas when she was here, and arrived at the figure then. So I might agree that the figure might be out of date by now. I just used the same figure as we worked then. But I didn't go ahead with this then because we were providing support ourselves with the government grant. That was all. If there is any advice from officers whether or not we can amend our own amendment, I don't know. Thank you.
Councillor Hoy, with regards to your amendments there that you've heard a number of items that have been raised. Do you wish to update your amendment? Because I can take amendments to your amendment, unadvised. So you may wish to update your amendments, taking on board what has been suggested and said.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm willing to amend the first one. I would need officer advice because obviously it was mentioned a task and finish group quite quickly, but I think if we said 3 months, it's right in the middle of the election, I would guess. So yeah, that might not be appropriate. So I'd take, can I have some help from officers and when might be appropriate, or from Councillor Belton when she might think appropriate as well.
Okay, let me take some advice on that, Councillor Hoy. Yeah. Mr. Wilson. Wilkins. Mr. Willis, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I just wanted to offer the Council some advice in relation to the amendment as originally described by Councillor Hoy as well. I'm a little concerned in that I'm the statutory finance officer for this council, and the council, when agreeing the budget, needs to be very mindful of what the statutory finance officer says in his or her assurance statement. That gives you the assurance that it's okay, it's legal, and the estimates have been put together accurately and there's sufficient reserves. And it's my judgment, my professional judgment, that you rely upon. That's why I'm here. I draw your attention to page 322. There's a table of reserves there, and discussion about we have plenty of reserves, we're putting money into reserves. You can see in
Councillor, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we have to wait for it to be turned on. We have had this before. I'm not here to debate officers. I think it's quite clear we're proposing this to go to a task and finish group, which is when officers can then input into it. We're not. The amendment now is to move this hopefully to a task and finish group, which will finish quickly, which officers can then input to say whether it's legal or not, or within our policy or not. But we're not here to debate officers. Officers should not be debating with us. We should be debating amongst ourselves.
Councillor Hoy, I note your point of order there, but I'll let Mr. Willis to get to at the end of what he wanted to say.
Thank you, Chair. I would absolutely never want to debate with members at a council meeting, never mind the budget meeting. I was hopefully just pointing out my statutory obligations and powers in relation to this council and the budget. And it's me, not any other councillor, that the council itself as a whole should be listening to when it comes to the robustness of the estimates and the assurance statement. In relation to the following on the actual point, I've spoken briefly to my head of revenues and benefits in relation to the practicalities of such a payment being made and how we would deal with that. And it is complex, even if we can in some way separate it from the actual scheme, the local council tax support scheme. There are a number of related questions that we would need to bottom out before we could implement such an idea. What if people have council tax arrears? Do we still pay it? Is there an effective date? What if people fall into the support scheme during the year? Or is it paid pro rata? There are a number of other issues that we would need to address, so I'd be reluctant to give a time frame within which we'd be able to deliver this.
Okay. Councillor Mrs. Wilson.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, the amendment that has been put forward by Councillor Hoy, is that what you wish to have added, or is there something additional to that?
No, that is actually what I was asking for, and if appropriate, I'm very happy to second.
Okay.
Is that appropriate?
Well, the amendment has been seconded by Councillor Mr. Wilson.
Oh, sorry, it has. Sorry.
So I won't jump in the middle of that. I'll leave you to sort that out when you get home.
Wrong, Mr. Wilson.
Wrong, Mr. Wilson.
Just saying. Just saying.
Apologies.
The real one,
Apologies, I married you
the
off.
real one is also in the room. Don't cause a domestic.
Okay. My confusion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm quite confused. What are we, point one, because Councillor Hoy asked the question of the time frames if we went into a quick working party. Are we voting on that, or are we sticking to the original amendment that Councillor Hoy put in? I'm a little bit confused on this now.
Okay, thank you. I think I need a little bit of clarification here, because if we go with the amendment of Councillor Hoy's with a time frame, can you give me a time frame on that? So, hang on just a second. Look, okay, we're trying to see get some answer to that in a second.
Chairman, I just want to check with Councillor Hoy whether or not we are now moving down the route of looking at a task and finish group. And if we are, then I believe I have some wording which I've scribbled here, but I should be able to decipher if that would be helpful.
Yes, we are.
Okay, if you'd like to read that out for me, please.
Yes, so Chairman, listening to what members have said, then I would be suggesting something like that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I'll just say because you already have that here, sets up a time-limited working group to determine whether payments should be made to residents affected by the cost of living crisis within the district, including to whom, how it should be resourced, and financial amounts.
Councillor Hoy, are you happy with that wording?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That's what I wanted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Efty, does that satisfy your point of order?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Does this need a second, or is it covered by the first second?
It's covered by the first second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, Mrs Mason. Oh, disappeared. Okay, Councillor Mrs Mason, you indicated to speak.
I seem to have a slight cramp problem,
Okay.
so, which is more painful than I'd like to describe.
Yes.
Yes, I'm not quite sure, because the original motion amendment seems to have got lost. One thing I would like to ask and be concerned about is the effect on the budget, because the budget at the moment is balanced. I'm hoping that the officers' comments will have be able to clarify that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for that question, Councillor Mrs Mason. It's helpful for me to be able to make that point. If the Council had been minded to approve the amendment, then before you did so, then I would have been advising you that we don't have 291,000 spare in next year's budget to fund it. And so I would be advising you as the statutory officer not to approve it, because to do so, you would not be approving a balanced budget. But that's not the case. And we are going to be looking into this and the practicalities of its implementation after this budget is set. That's something that we should be comfortable with, because from tomorrow, if this budget is approved by Council tonight, things will change. It will be immediately out of date. All sorts of things will change that we have no control over whatsoever. It's just our best guess, with lots of professional judgment, but it's just our best guess. So this, along with 100 other things, will happen in the coming days, weeks and months as we go through 23-24 that will change the budget. We will be having the budget monitoring report coming to Executive soon for Q3. And if that is going to, I don't know what it is yet, but if that is suggesting that we're going to have an underspend this year, that's something new that we don't know when we set next year's budget now, and that could provide some resource. It's just one example of things that could change. If it's an overspend, we'll have another problem. So what I'm trying to describe is there is lots of uncertainty, and having such a review as this is just another one of those uncertain things that will occur during the course of 23-4 that we'll do our best to try and address and fund if possible if Council want it.
Right, next on my list is Councillor Mrs Belton.
Thank you. My point's slightly out of time now because it was in response to Councillor Hoy originally asking a question. One thing I would say though, we have a cost of living working group, we have a cost of living team that are nationally recognised doing fantastic work, and if this is passed, and I would support this amendment now, I would just ask that ONS look at the work being done by the cost of living group. There's a dashboard there showing us who is the most in need, and it's not the people that we automatically look at every time. So I think I would really welcome this work being done, and I would say do it in conjunction with the cost of living team, who have got an awful lot of valuable data, headed up by Tracy Lilly, who's been doing some good work there.
Okay, members, we need to move this to the vote. Councillor Hoy, what I would ask you to do is, if you'd like to read out your amendments one by one, and I will take the vote on them individually. So if you'd like to read out your first amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. That the ONS committee set up a time-limited working group to determine whether payment should be made to residents within the district affected by the cost of living crisis, including to whom, how, sources of funding and financial amounts. Do you want me to read them out?
No, we'll do one at a time.
Yeah,
Thank you,
you.
Councillor Hoy. Right, members, those in favour, please indicate. Okay, members, that is unanimous. Thank you. And that will be added to the list at item... I think it's going to be. If I got my alphabet right. Councillor Hoy, would you like to read out your second amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. Park home site fees increased by 14.1% rather than 11.1%.
Okay, members, those in favour? Can you keep your hands up, please? Thank you, members. That's unanimous, and that will become item B. Okay, Councillor Hoy, your third amendment.
Thank you. That members can only claim one special responsibility allowance and to refer the matter to IRP, which I think is an independent review panel, remuneration panel.
Okay, members, those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, can I have the numbers, please? Okay, members, 34-4 and 3 abstentions. That is carried and will become item Q. That's correct. You okay now? Okay. Okay, going back to our original list. Councillor Ward.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can I ask for a quick comfort break, please?
Yeah, I think that's going to be acceptable. I'll suspend the process, the proceedings for 10 minutes.
Tax. Okay. So on that basis, then I'm quite happy with the rest of them because obviously they're figures that we need to approve, but I can't support that for the same reasons I couldn't support it in the previous vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hoy. I've got to wait for the mic to come up. Try that. No.
Hopefully that works now.
Yes.
Could I just have confirmation from Tim Willis that all these points are really just adding up, aren't they? So we're not agreeing the figures, we're just saying these figures add up to this, and if you take this figure, it agrees to that figure. That's my understanding of it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That is correct, Councillor Hoy. It is a technical paper in that you've agreed the council tax increase for next year in the budget report. What this does is reflect all the background calculations that go to make up the total council tax, of which the district council's share is just one component. It includes all the other preceptors in this, what is a standard report, that almost the same report with different numbers appears in front of all councils across the country at this time of year. Thank you.
Okay, nobody else is indicating. Members, we have a number of items here. Are you happy that I take these en bloc? Okay. It was worth a shot.
Sorry, at the risk of going through the same as you went through for the last one, I only object to one of them. I'm quite happy to support the others. And I don't know if anybody else in this side of the chamber feels the same way. That might save a bit of time.
Okay, which one do you not, which one do you...
Item F, Chairman, is the only one I will vote differently on.
Yeah.
Sorry. If I may, members, there is only one recommendation here, and as the Section 151 officer has set out, these are all related to each other.
Can you clarify? Does that mean I take them en bloc or not? Members are being advised that I need to take them en bloc.
On a point of order, I'm sorry. With the greatest respect, I don't see how that can be the case. The last item we spoke on had several recommendations, all of which were numbered or lettered on the side. This is exactly the same. There are certain aspects of this which I agree with. There are certain aspects of this which I do not agree with, and I will not accept having to vote with them en bloc. I don't see what the difference is. Perhaps the monitoring officer could explain.
Chairman, I can only just reiterate what my advice is. You do have one recommendation here, and there is a correlation between all of these recommendations. Sorry, all of these proposals within the recommendation.
Councillor Mrs. Bell.
I think this has been clarified, but I'm just going to say it again. No one's actually agreeing with the amounts, the figures in terms of what we're charging, what we're doing. This is purely a technical sum of what's just been agreed. It's been noted, those that didn't agree with the increase, so that's already public record. This is purely adding the numbers up now. It doesn't mean you're now in support of the increase that you weren't in support of before. It's a technical paper only and not actually in terms of opinions, so to speak. It's maths.
Councillor Longman.
Thank you, Chairman. Simple as my life is, if it's just a matter of a run-on from the previous vote, why are we voting for this at all? If this is purely an adding up process, totaling process of what we've already voted, why on earth have I got an item to vote on that's already been approved?
Mr. Willis, can you please explain?
I'll try, Chair. My colleague, the monitoring officer, might be able to help me here because it's legal. But it's in relation to sections 31 to 36 of the Act. So the 5.1 is saying the Council resolves that the following amounts now calculated by the Council for the year in accordance with sections 31 to 36 of the Act. So what it's asking for approval on is that the calculations that sit behind the consequence of approving the council tax increase are as follows. And then it lists all the recommendations A to H. And as F points out, it doesn't say for the council to approve the council tax for Rochford District Council at £252.45, which is a 2.97% increase next year. That's the previous report. What it's saying is that that 252.45 is the amount based on the following calculation. So to vote against it in simple terms would be to argue that the calculation is wrong, not that the principle of a council tax increase is wrong.
Councillor Lorman.
Hey, Chairman, if I can come back on that, it's a fait accompli, isn't it? I mean, we've voted something. Why are we discussing it? It's voted for it, and we've just got to accept the officer's remarks that these figures are as a continuance of the previous vote. Surely, I don't get it because it's very confusing to me. Why am I having two stabs at the blinking thing? You know, I just don't get it.
I understand it appears a bit illogical, but it's the law, and it's the law because Rochford District Council is a collection authority. So the council collects council tax on behalf of the county, police, fire and the parishes. And it's because of that that the council needs to approve this report, because what we're saying is we've done all the calculations based on all of the precept advice we've had from all of those other precepting bodies. We collect all that money in and then we pay it over to them during the year. And what this is attempting to do is to say, if we add together all of the income that we'll generate from all of those precepts, because we're going to collect it all, and it's broken down in this way, that's the calculation. So the other preceptors will look at this report and say, Rochford District Council have done the calculation, they've got our share of what they're collecting and they're going to pay it over to us. That's the principle behind the Act, which underpins this report, which is a statutory council tax resolution report. And as I say, in this format, almost identical format, with obviously different numbers, the same report is agreed by every council, must be agreed by every council at this time of year across the country.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, can you please keep it brief?
Yeah. I will do, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. So I accept exactly what Mr. Willis is saying. I've just got a question, though, really, is from memory, this is only my fourth year in this council, but I don't remember ever having to vote en bloc like this before. So we've got a different set of people up at the front than we've had previously. So did we do it wrong in the past, or why are we doing it differently this year? I just need to understand this, really, because we've always been able to vote separately on these if we've disagreed.
No. My memory tells me different, Councillor Wilkinson, I'm afraid. Okay. Councillor Mrs Mason.
I think the office has explained it exceptionally well. We have done the same academic exercise every year in my memory. I can understand that certain members might feel uncomfortable with it, but they have the option of voting against it if they so wish. But it is very much a technical document, very much a procedure, if you like, and it's just for public record. We're not agreeing or disagreeing, we're just explaining. So perhaps can I suggest that the vote be put? Thank you.
No. Okay. Right. I've listened to your points of order. Thank you, members. I'm going to go for a block vote for all of the items from A to J. That's on pages 4.4 and 4.5. All those in favour? Okay. Thank you, members. Those against? Any abstentions? There's 31 for, 0 against, and 6 abstentions. Thank you, members. Okay, members. Agenda item 5 is allocation of seats on committees. Members, the Interim Director for People and Governance, Andrew Hunkin, will now introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. The Council agreed the constitution of the Council's committees on the 13th of December 2022, but not the nominations to those committees. An addendum to item 5 has been tabled based on the nominations as at the 13th of December, but amended to reference any political composition changes up to the 20th of February and the independent group's resolution to nominate to the Chief Officer's Appointments Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any members wish to speak to this item? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll move that from the chair.
I'll second it,
Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Fearson. Okay, members, there's one recommendation on page 5.4 of the documentation. It is proposed that the Council resolves 1, that the members be appointed to serve on the committees for the remainder of the 2022-23 municipal year. Those in favour? Thank you, members. Those against? Any abstentions? Okay. Well, that's 36 in favour, 0 against, 0 abstentions. And 1 non-voting, I make that. Thank you, members. That item is now carried. Members, just before I close the meeting, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and I'd just like to extend my apologies to both Councillor Mr Wilson and Councillor Mrs Wilson for the confusion earlier on. I do apologise for that.
I assume that Mr Wilson accepts your apology too.
Thank you, members. I make that 10:06 and I close the meeting. Thank you.
Members, please be upstanding per chairman and chief executive.